check. We made 13 Godot games. Zane's first full game in Godot, Ping, was made for the Kenny Game Jam in 2024. It's an arcade action puzzle game about routing network packets.
Sam joined on for our second game, Darwinism. Is a fish-eating arcade game where you try to evolve legs. We're just getting our feet wet in Godot. So we're Zane and
Sam.
And together, we're a couple local Boston game developers. Together, syzygy.systems. So you can remember it with this easy mnemonic: Sam, yeah; Zane, yeah; games, yeah. So our next game was called Draft and Graft. It's a body horror auto battler and roguelike dude builder. This is for a week-long game jam. There's a nice split of the work on this one. So we're both programmers, but there's a good split between this shop stage and the battling stage. We used 2D skeletons for these characters, these cutout characters, and that was a relatively new feature at the time. So we kind of fought the engine a lot doing that. We weren't able to flip them on the horizontal axis. So we kind of did this hacky solution where we had to duplicate all of the modular limbs and flip all their values individually. Yeah.
We split up for our next game. We made them around a common theme. You only get one, and we kept them secret from each other while we developed them. My game here is Broken Keyboard Hero, which is a Metroidvania with an absurdly limited control scheme. When you release a key, you can't press it again until you restart the game. I knew Zane's rapport with puzzle games, and I wanted to deliberately design lots of twists and turns and eurekas and kind of keep the ideas of the game going one step further than you would think at any point. Got more familiar with a lot of Godot systems here. I have a rudimentary tile map, doing some shaders work, rich text effects, and just generally getting better at designing systems in GDScript, like a dialogue system that allowed for sort of novel puzzle authoring. This is also the first time I went and compiled Godot myself for a custom build. I had a slimmed down feature set. This game is much like a puzzle box, so I wanted the executable even to have this nice compact feel to it.
My game for this month was called Hail Fucking Mary, and it's an anti-gambling art game where your only option is to bet everything and inevitably lose. Designing this joke game with Sam's first exposure to it in mind led me to creating this very deliberate experience of surprise and information overload, and there's a little twist ending that is supposed to be funny and surprising. I made extensive use of UI nodes, sub-viewports, and did some shader work for this game. So all of this was part of a project that I called Game a Month, where we tried to make a game every month for a year. So when you make when you play an instrument or learn a language, we all understand that you need to practice that a lot to get good at it. But many fail to apply the same logic to games, and I see a lot of people who will just toil away for years trying to make some sort of dream game, but they don't really know what they're doing, and they haven't had this important practice. So what if we sit down and deliberately try to make as many games as possible in a short amount of time, utilize jams and demo nights for external deadlines, and what can we learn from making all these small games?
One thing we can learn is that not every idea is good. Animal Kingdom Tactics is a game where you guide these bumbling, adorable creatures to slaughter the heroes of an otherwise peaceful island. This game idea, we spent a lot of time making the systems, and we didn't get a lot of time to playtest it. By the last day of this jam, we finally were able to do our first full playthrough, and we didn't really enjoy it. We did get to work with an artist for the first time, and we were new to directing artists, so the timelines were a little rushed, and some things didn't go like we wanted. We didn't give great direction on, for example, the tile set here. But that was also a learning experience. We were considering revising the game after the jam, but ultimately we decided it's important to know when to throw something out. If you can't get to the fun in a game fast enough, even if your idea is fun, it might not be worth continuing. might be worth going on to the next thing. So we put together a final level, we shipped the game onto itch for the jam, and we called it quits. In the sense, we were killing the game here. And Ivy Sly says in his blog post on Scope Creep, most games are about killing dudes. Given the right context, killing dudes is very cathartic. Why shouldn't that be true for killing ideas or assets, code, features, etc.?
Our next game was Plover Drive. It's an asymmetric, sort of Nidhogg-like, beach-themed two-player versus shmup. So for this game, we brought on an extra programmer and a musician, and we went to a beach house for a week to just hole up and develop this game. And when you work with people in a room together in the physical space, there can be this sort of magic or energy in the air, and it's very practical too. So when our musician Splitsuns was doing the music, we could immediately hear every iteration because he was playing it aloud in the same room and give instant feedback on everything and really guide it moment to moment. We also worked to get him in the engine. We were inspired by this talk from last year's GodotCon. I put it really small here, by Casey Dahlgren and Sarah Noose about getting non-technical people, musicians, artists, into the engine and giving them the autonomy to iterate on things on their own. And this is very successful. We were able to give him the tools and direction he needed to succeed. What that looked like for this game was pulling out sound effects into their own scene and just letting him own that. Even though he didn't fully know Godot, he could work in that space and iterate on his own time. Being in the same room, we were able to prototype quick, throw out some prototypes, and get to this idea pretty fast. The proximity also inspired the multiplayer aspect of this game. And then after that, we took an extra week, just Sam and I, to play test and iterate on the level design and edit down, cut out the bad ones that were making things drag out and ruining the experience.
In Metempsychosis, you play as an eternally reincarnating worm trying to wiggle its way to freedom from the cycle of suffering. This was a 4-day game jam, and we also had a musician this time as well as an artist. But there is more friction at both the beginning and end of the project in terms of trying to get them the autonomy we had in Plover Drive. It takes time for the person learning the engine and the person teaching the engine. So in this case, it was more important for us to do the sort of tedious thing and deal with the friction, the known friction of just going back and forth on these assets. It was ultimately more productive. Additionally, because it was a 4-day cycle, we were sort of stuck with an unfun game mechanic, a movement feel. But the art direction came together pretty nicely, as well as some of the technical side of the art. So we just pushed to finish out nice sounds, get the art together, make a full level, and have 2 different endings for the game, so we could really call it complete and finished. Derek Yu says, if you treat finishing like a skill rather than simply a step in the process, you can acknowledge that it's something you can get better at.
Our next game was Pieces of My Heart, a game where you stack tetraminos to clear lines and date them. This is our friend who did the art for the game, their idea. This is another game with good modular systems, with clean borders. There's the Tetris game, there's a sort of affinity system that affects it, and there's this dialogue, visual novel aspect that feeds into the affinity as well. We ended up having this conflict on the art direction so I ended up, for most of our other games, I was leading the art direction, but bringing on someone else to do the art direction, there was some tension there. For example, I felt like the background for the Tetris game needed to be opaque so you could see what was happening, and the background lines wouldn't show through in muddy things, but they disagreed, and we had to reach a compromise, and this happened pretty late in the development of the game. So it's very good to be opinionated about these things, but you need to find these conflicts early and work through them quickly.
Our largest and longest game thus far is the Bomb Split. It's a split EP with 2 games, platformers where you throw bombs, they propel you, and you explore levels that engage with the particularities of the movement in each game. We started this after a 2-day prototype on a platformer that neither of us was enjoying making or playing. So we again split off, started on work on our own prototypes, and came together with this sort of 2-game package. This is our first commercial game. We spent 7 months working on it and shipped it on the tape you see spinning there. And we spent another month getting it on Steam. Side B of the bomb split is Grenadier. You have these sort of bouncy grenades that engage with the geometry a lot. The Grenadier you can play is the 4th or 5th iteration on the Grenadier I started. I was discarding things a lot more than I was used to. I would spend like a week working on sort of the first set of levels, only to play test it at a demo night here in Boston and realize that everything kind of had to get revised. I go back and forth on how satisfied I am with the final product, but I got very familiar with the iteration work it takes to deeply explore an oddly shaped idea.
Side A of the bomb split was my game Explo. It's also a 2D platformer. You use bombs to explore a mysterious world as this very small guy. The large interconnected nature of the game's world caused a lot of problems in development. The level design became less flexible and less malleable because I couldn't easily move around pieces of it. I had to rearrange the whole world every time. The engine struggled with the scale of things as well. There was a lot of fighting with the engine on this game. The VFX and audio caused some very surprising lag spikes that were a big problem for this twitchy action game. The tile map, the large tile maps would lag. It would take potentially minutes to load a scene, just tabbing between scenes in my editor. And zooming out would slow it down to a crawl. There were just too many tiles, and Godot couldn't handle it. The amount of tiles, also the colliders, exhausted the RID, the resource ID limit in Godot. So we actually had to recompile the engine to increase that cap to keep players from falling through the level. And we had to do that 1 day before we had to put it on 100 tapes and sell it at an event. The great thing about Godot is that it can be okay to compile the engine 1 day before shipping. That can work. When we put this out on Steam, including Godot Steam was very easy because we already were doing a custom build. Also, you should invest in your level editing tools so that you can iterate fast, sort of like how we want to make games fast and move on and learn things quickly. You should do that within a game for your level design as well. Start on paper if you can, and I found it useful to use scene tiles so that you can, for your entities, I found it useful to use scene tiles to represent the entities because then I could move them around with the same workflow as editing the level geometry.
Our next game is on the compilation tapes you all received in your bag. This is Four Faces of Fenric. It's a tactical, expressive platformer. This was a 2-day game jam. It was on site in Boston for the Global Game Jam, and we had an extra programmer, artist, and musician here. This was our smoothest development thus far, I would say. We properly assessed, we got a short amount of time, so that asset friction that kept coming up earlier, we're just going to deal with it. And that worked out fine. Me and Zane were responsible for getting stuff in the engine. They would develop it, send it to Discord, etc. We also went with the grain of the engine more. What I mean there is we didn't fight it like with Explo. We sort of ate the fact that we wouldn't be able to, have large interconnected worlds. Each level is going to be its own scene to explore the ideas we care about for this game. Made things a lot smoother to author and reconnect as we discovered the shape of the game. Also just, relying on the fact that nodes would be connected in a very specific way. We weren't super concerned with the modularity. We can attach scripts to bespoke nodes, and that's okay. This game was a 2-day to 1 week project. It turned out very good, and it's because we went with the grain of the engine there, right? We leaned into the scrappiness of Godot. It's probably our richest game that we made in the shortest period, coming off of just making 2 platformers. We had been thinking a lot about platformer design, and as good as it is to practice broadly, we've been doing a lot of different genres here. practicing narrow has its benefits too. We came up with a grade movement system basically overnight because we had spent the last 8 months thinking about these sort of things. We also took another week after this game and had another game jam at the end of that week to flesh out the levels and playtest, and that really brought the whole thing together. Tom Francis on playtesting says that phase of development is called making the game good, and if you don't have time for it, it's as big of a problem as it sounds.
Our latest game is Puzzlin' Gardens. It's a puzzle game about planting flowers. Rather than teaching you the rules of these flowers explicitly, you have to derive the rules yourself given unique solutions to the puzzles. This was a week-long jam, and we actually threw out our first prototype halfway through and took just a few days to make this version of it, and we were much better off for it. This game, despite that, probably had the highest ratio of playtest time to development time, and it led to a very good curve of the levels where it feels like a conversation between the designer and the player. So in summary, learn to finish and then learn what to throw out. Iterate fast to learn quickly. Make time to play test. These are sort of some of these are sort of in tension with each other, finishing versus throwing out and working fast, but making time to play test. But practicing a lot helps you navigate these tensions and know what's valuable. Practice broadly. Practice narrowly.
Figure out where you and your tools, like Godot, agree. You can compile Godot. Get collaborators in the room together if you can. Get collaborators in the engine if you can, if time permits. Work quickly to reach a point where you can divide work, like if you have two people in the same domain, or assign work. And that's all. We are syzygy.systems. That's a URL. You can put it in our phone right now and find us and find our games. And there's a lot of people who help make these games possible who we alluded to here, and that's all their information. Thank you.